Okay, so I want you to close your eyes for a second. We're going back in time.
Where are we going?
It's the late 90s. Let's say it's 1999. You're sitting in front of a computer monitor that's roughly the size and weight of a microwave oven.
I remember those, the beige boxes.
The beige boxes, exactly. And you're listening to that screeching, clicking sound of a 56K modem trying to connect to the internet.
A sound that an entire generation will never experience. It's probably for the best.
Probably. And everywhere you look on that painfully slow-loading web page, on your television, on a billboard on your way to work, you see him.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. The sock.
The sock. It's just a plain white athletic tube sock. It has two completely mismatched button eyes, a little felt watch wrapped around its neck like a collar.
And the microphone. You can't forget the microphone.
A little stick microphone just sort of taped to its side, and it's flailing around, interviewing people on the street, making these frantic, high-pitched jokes. You literally could not escape this thing.
No, you couldn't. It really was a phenomenon. I think for anyone who didn't live through that very specific window of time, it's hard to communicate just how pervasive that puppet was.
Pervasive is the right word.
It wasn't just a mascot for a company. It became a kind of B-list celebrity in its own right.
B-list. I would argue it was A-list for a minute there. I mean, it was on Good Morning America. It was in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And we were talking, of course, about the icon, the legend, the disaster that was Pets.com.
Disaster is the key word there, I think.
Right, because I feel like today, if you mention Pets.com to someone, it's basically just a punchline.
It's shorthand.
It's shorthand for dumb.com failure. You say Pets.com, people kind of chuckle, they think about the sock puppet, and that's it. The conversation's over.
Yeah, the story gets flattened.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to do this deep dive, because I feel like we are missing the actual story, the real meat of it.
You are absolutely right. The puppet is the memory that everyone holds on to, but the reality is a much darker, much more complex story. It's about capital, it's about hubris, and a fundamental misunderstanding of, like, business physics.
Business physics, I like that.
This isn't just a story about a funny ad campaign that went wrong. It's a case study in how you can incinerate $300 million of investment capital in just about 24 months.
300 million.
Mm-hmm.
That number, it's still just so hard to wrap your head around.
It's a staggering amount of money, especially in $1999.
And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to unpack how that happened. We are going to talk about lawsuits with insult comic dogs.
That's a story in itself.
We're going to talk about 21 tons of dog food being airlifted to Alaska. And we're going to try to answer that fundamental question: how do you spend $11 million on advertising to make $600,000 back?
The math is truly the most terrifying and I think the most instructive part of this whole saga.
So let's get into it. Our main source for this is the Wikipedia entry for Pets.com, accessed this year, 2026. But before we get to the sock puppet and the Super Bowl ad, we have to start at the beginning. Because Pets.com didn't actually begin with the puppet, did it?
No, it didn't. And this is a part of the history that usually gets glossed over in the punchline version of the story.
Right.
It started, like so many things, in the mid-90s with a domain name.
The digital real estate rush, people were just snapping up URLs.
Exactly. We're talking about November 1994. The web is barely a toddler at this point.
Yeah.
There's an entrepreneur named Greg McLemore, and he's looking at the internet, and he sees the potential for these category killers.
It's a category killer.
The idea that you could have a single online destination for a very specific interest. Toys.com. Cars.com. So he goes out and he registers the domain pets.com.
Which, I mean, honestly, that's a home run of a domain name. It's short, it's descriptive, it's easy to spell. In 1994, getting that is like buying a plot of land in Manhattan before any of the skyscrapers went up.
It was prime digital real estate, absolutely.
Right.
But for a long time, that's all it was. It was just real estate, a concept. Mm-hmm. It eventually launched in late 1998 as a spin-off of a company called WebMagic.
Okay.
But it was small, it was quiet, it wasn't making any waves. The Pets.com that we all remember, the monster that ate the world, that really didn't start until early 1999.
And that's when Julie Wainwright comes into the picture.
That's right. Julie Wainwright takes over as CEO in early 1999. And her vision was not to have a small niche website for pet enthusiasts. Her vision was, for all intents and purposes, global domination of the pet supply category.
Ambitious.
Very. And to do that, she knew she needed fuel. A lot of it.
Rocket fuel. And this is where the story takes a turn that I think a lot of people just completely forget or maybe never even knew. Because when I think of Pets.com, I think of this scrappy, kind of stupid startup operating out of a garage somewhere.
Right.
But they weren't alone, were they? They had the biggest big brother you could possibly have in the e-commerce playground.
They certainly did. And this is absolutely crucial for understanding why investors went so crazy for this company. Amazon.com was involved. And not just as a casual observer or a fan.
Wait, Amazon, as in Jeff Bezos, we're going to sell everything? Amazon.
The one and only.
Hmm.
In the very first round of venture funding, which was in March of 1999, Amazon didn't just toss in a few bucks for goodwill.
What did they do?
They purchased a 54% majority stake in Pets.com.
Hold on, 54%. So Amazon owned more than half of the company.
Effectively, yes. They were the majority owner right out of the gate.
I had no idea.
Most people don't.
Hmm.
And along with some other big-name venture capital firms, Hummer Winblad, Bowman Capital Management, they poured in an initial $10.5 million. But the money, in a way, was almost secondary to the signal it sent.
What do you mean?
You have to remember the atmosphere of 1999. Amazon was the kingmaker. If Jeff Bezos pointed his finger at a company in the e-commerce space and said, "This is the one," the market treated it as gospel.
So it's like a seal of approval. It's a massive shortcut for all the other investors.
It's more than a seal of approval. It's a coronation. It says, Amazon thinks this is the future, so it must be the future. Don't waste your money betting on anyone else.
Wow.
In fact, Julie Wainwright herself, the CEO, she called the partnership, and this is a direct quote, "a marriage made in heaven."
A marriage made in heaven.
And from a narrative and fundraising standpoint, it was. It gave Pets.com instant, unassailable credibility. It told the entire world, this is the winner. And even after later funding rounds diluted their stake, by October 2000, Amazon still held 30% of the company. They were in it for the long haul.
Or so they thought.
Or so they thought.
So, okay, they have the cash, they have the backing of the biggest player in the game, they have this marriage made in heaven. What was the strategy? Was it just, sell dog food online?
The strategy was the mantra of the entire era, get big fast.
Get big fat.
This was not about building a sustainable, profitable business slowly and carefully. This was a land grab. It was about achieving market dominance at any cost. So they took that venture capital and they immediately started pouring it into massive infrastructure.
When you say infrastructure, what are we talking about? Like servers and coders?
Servers and coders, yes, but physical infrastructure too. We're talking about massive, sprawling warehouses. They were setting up state-of-the-art distribution centers all across the United States.
So they were building a physical footprint.
A huge one. They were building their own shipment network. They were trying to replicate Amazon's model, but for a single category, and do it overnight. They even went out and just bought their biggest online competitor, a site called PetStore.com, in June of 2000.
How much did that cost?
$10.6 million.
They just wrote a check for $10 million to eliminate the competition.
That was the Get Big Fast playbook. Consolidate the market. Be the only game in town. The idea was to build the skeleton of a giant retail empire literally overnight.
Okay, so you build the warehouse. You buy the trucks. You buy the competition. But now you have a bunch of enormous empty warehouses. You need people to actually, buy the kibble.
And that brings us to the most famous and certainly the most expensive part of the entire story, the marketing machine.
The puppet.
The puppet. So where did this thing even come from? Because it's such a weird, almost daddyist concept.
Mm-hmm.
We sell pet food, and to communicate that, here is a sock.
It came from the ad agency TBWA Shea Day. Now, you have to understand, these weren't amateurs. These were the same creative minds who had just given the world the Taco Bell Chihuahua.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
Yes.
I can still hear it in my head.
They knew how to create what we would now call a viral sensation, even before social media really existed. They were masters of creating these cultural earworms.
Annoying but memorable mascots seemed to be their specialty.
Annoying but memorable was absolutely their specialty. And they designed the puppet to be deceptively simple. Just a sock, the button eyes, the flailing arms. But the genius of it, or maybe the madness of it, was in the performance. Right. Who was the voice?
It was voiced and operated by the comedian Michael Ian Black.
Oh, I love Michael Ian Black. From The State. I had no idea that was him.
It was him. And he gave it that manic, slightly desperate, high-pitched energy. The puppet debuted in August of 1999, and the goal was brutally simple. Make sure that every single human being in America knows the name Pets.com.
And I have to say, looking back at it, it worked. I mean, here we are talking about it almost 30 years later.
In terms of pure brand awareness, it was an absolute masterpiece of advertising. The source material we're looking at notes that the puppet achieved cultural dominance in a matter of months.
How dominant are we talking?
Well, it was interviewed by People magazine. It got feature articles in Time and Entertainment Weekly. It appeared on Good Morning America, Nightline, and Live with Regis and Kathy Lee.
Wait, it was doing the talk show circuit? A piece of fabric was sitting on a couch next to Regis Philbin?
It was. It transcended being an ad and became a legitimate cultural character. And the absolute peak of this cultural insanity has to be the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1999.
Oh, I've heard about this. This is where it gets really crazy.
They commissioned something called a falloon.
A falloon? What on earth is a falloon?
It's a portmanteau. It's half float, half balloon. It was a 36-foot-tall version of the sock puppet.
36 feet?
36 feet. So I want you to just imagine a 3-story building made of nylon, shaped like a sock, just floating down 6th Avenue in New York City on Thanksgiving morning.
That is both horrifying and majestic at the same time.
It really was the perfect symbol of the bubble. Just this massive, hollow, inflated object taking up all the air in the room. And they didn't stop there. They started merchandising the puppet itself.
They sold the actual puppet.
They sold a replica of the sock puppet.
Yeah.
And it sold like crazy. 10,000 of them flew off the shelves in the first week. By July of 2000, they had sold 35,000 of them.
So people were paying money to own a company's advertisement.
Yes. And it even had an autobiography.
You are kidding me? A book?
A book. It was titled Me by Me. And it was this sort of coffee table book filled with photos and witty observations from the sock puppet.
I cannot grapple with the layers of absurdity here. They are an e-commerce company for pet supplies, but they are making money selling a book supposedly written by their sock puppet mascot.
Well, making money is a very generous term. They were generating revenue, certainly. But the cost to achieve this level of fame was absolutely astronomical. And the pinnacle of that spending came in January of 2000.
The Super Bowl?
The Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The absolute height of the dot-com mania. Pets.com buys a national advertising slot during the biggest television event of the year.
And Super Bowl ads are famously not cheap.
This one cost $1.2 million for 30 seconds.
$1.2 million for half a minute of television.
And culturally, again, it was a smash hit. USA Today's Ad Meter, which is the big ranking system for these things, it ranked the Pets.com ad as number 5 for the whole game. People loved it. It was funny. It had a catchy song. It was memorable.
Okay, but this is where the disconnect begins, right? This is where we have to put on our business analyst hats.
This is exactly the moment. Because having a famous mascot is great. It's wonderful for brand recognition. But does a famous mascot actually make people buy a 40-pound bag of dog food from your website?
That is the $300 million question, isn't it?
It is. There is a profound and often fatal difference between being famous and being a viable business. Everyone in America knew the puppet. But did everyone in America trust the puppet to deliver their pet supplies reliably and cheaply?
Before we get into the answer to that, there is one more story from this marketing mania phase that I think we just have to tell because it so perfectly encapsulates the mindset of the company at the time. The lawsuit.
Yes. The Triumph incident. This is almost Shakespearean in its pettiness and absurdity.
So for anyone listening who doesn't know, there's another famous dog puppet from that era, Triumph the Insult Comic Dog.
A cultural icon.
A cultural icon. He's a Rottweiler puppet. He smokes a cigar. He's incredibly rude to celebrities. He was a staple on Conan O'Brien's late night show.
Right. Created and performed by a brilliant comedy writer named Robert Smigel. Now, Smigel sees the Pets.com puppet, which, let's be honest, is a dog-like sock puppet holding a microphone, and he thinks, hey, this looks a little too much like my act.
So he sends a cease and desist letter, which is pretty standard stuff in Hollywood, right?
Very standard. A rational company, a company focused on its core operations, might have called him up, maybe worked out a small settlement, or more likely just ignored it, knowing that the characters were different enough.
But Pets.com was not a rational company.
Pets.com went nuclear. In April of 2000, they filed a lawsuit against Robert Smigel in U.S. District Court.
They sued him.
They sued him for $20 million.
$20 million? For what?
For defamation and trade libel. Their argument was that by claiming the Pets.com puppet was a ripoff, Smigel had damaged their brand and their business.
That is insane.
The CEO, Julie Wainwright, gave this amazing quote to the press. She said, "We were surprised when we received the letter because there's obviously no relation between the Pets.com sock puppet and Triumph."
I mean, okay, she has a point. One is a grumpy Rottweiler and one is a manic sock. But to sue a comedian for $20 million while you're trying to build a startup.
It just speaks to the hubris of the moment. They felt they were untouchable. They weren't just a pet store anymore. In their minds, they were a media empire. They were fighting these PR battles and legal battles, spending enormous amounts of money on lawyers.
At a time when, as we were about to see, their actual business was bleeding to death.
Precisely. The lawsuit, by the way, was eventually dismissed in February 2001. But by then, the company was already gone. It was a complete and utter waste of time, energy, and money.
Okay, so we've painted the picture. We have the Amazon backing, the warehouses, the famous puppet, the ridiculous lawsuits. Now let's lift the hood and look at the actual the business model. Because you threw out a number earlier that just made my jaw drop. 11 million in ads to make 600,000 in revenue.
It is staggering when you see it written down. So let's look at their first fiscal year, which ran from February to September of 1999. In those 9 months, Pets.com brought in a total of $619,000 in revenue. That's total sales.
619,000. I mean, that's not nothing, but that's like the annual revenue of a decent neighborhood pizza place.
It's a very small number for a company with this much hype.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. To get that $619,000 in sales, they spent $11.8 million on advertising.
So let me do the math here. For every $1 in sales they brought in, they spent nearly $20 just shouting, "Hey, look at us."
That's right. A 20-to-1 ratio of ad spend to revenue. And that is just advertising. That doesn't count the cost of the goods they sold, the warehouses, the executive salaries, the legal fees for suing comedians.
How does anyone on the planet look at that spreadsheet and say, yes, this is a company that is ready to go public?
Well, welcome to the year 2000. Despite those numbers, which were public, they launched their IPO, their initial public offering, in February 2000, right after that big Super Bowl ad.
They went on the stock market.
They listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange under the symbol IPET. And they successfully raised $82.5 million. The stock opened at $11 a share.
So the market looked at this machine that was literally designed to burn cash and said, here, have another $82 million to burn. Why? I mean, were investors just stupid?
Stupid is a harsh word. I would say they were intoxicated. They were high on the narrative. The theory at the time, which now sounds insane, was customer acquisition at all costs.
Get the customer now, worry about profit later.
Exactly. The belief was that if you grabbed the customer, if you got their email address, you could figure out how to make profit off them sometime in the distant future. It was a land grab, but there were fundamental structural flaws in the Pets.com business model that no amount of time or customers would have ever fixed.
Okay, let's break those down. What was flaw number one?
Flaw number one, no market research.
Come on, none.
Zero. The source material is explicit about this. There was no independent market research conducted before the launch. They never actually asked the fundamental question, do people want to buy heavy bags of pet food online and have them shipped to their house? They just assumed they would.
That feels like the first slide in any Business 101 presentation. Is there a market for your product?
You would think so, but flaw number two was the real killer. And this is where we need to talk about a concept called unit economics.
Okay, break that down for me. What are unit economics?
Unit economics is the most basic building block of a business. It's the question, on a single transaction, do you make or lose money? So how much does it cost me to sell 1 unit of my product, and do I make a profit on that specific sale?
And Pets.com was?
Pets.com was failing this test catastrophically. The data shows they were selling their merchandise for approximately 1/3 the price they paid a distributor to obtain it.
Wait. Let me get this straight. If they bought a squeaky toy from a supplier for $3...
They were turning around and selling it to you for $1.
Why in God's name would you do that?
Aggressive customer acquisition. They were trying to undercut all the local pet stores. They thought, if we give them a deal that's too good to be true, they'll become loyal customers for life. But even in their second fiscal year, after they'd been around for a bit, they were still selling goods at about 27% below their cost.
So they were personally subsidizing every single dog bone and cat toy that left their warehouse?
Exactly. And this creates what economists call a death spiral. Usually in a healthy business, when your sales go up, your financial situation improves.
More sales, more profit.
Right. But for Pets.com, because they lost a significant amount of money on every single item they sold, The dramatic rise in their sales only hastened their demise. The more they sold, the faster they went bankrupt.
So success was actually accelerating their failure.
Precisely. And then, on top of all that, there's the shipping problem.
The shipping problem. This is the business physics you were talking about.
This is the physics. It's inescapable.
Yeah.
What is the most common, most frequently purchased item a pet owner buys?
Food and cat litter.
Right. And what are the defining physical properties of a big bag of dog food and a tub of cat litter?
They're heavy and they're bulky.
They are extremely heavy and dense. A 40-pound bag of cat litter is 40 pounds of what is essentially sand and clay.
Yeah.
Shipping 40 pounds of clay across the country via FedEx or UPS is incredibly expensive.
And Pets.com, to attract customers, was offering free or heavily discounted shipping.
They often did. They ran promotions for free shipping or charged a very low flat rate. But the profit margin on pet food itself is already razor thin. Best case, a retailer makes maybe 2 to 4%.
Okay, so let's do the math on that. I go to Pets.com, I buy a $20 bag of dog food. The actual profit for Pets.com on the food itself is what, maybe 50 or 80 cents?
Best case scenario, yes. Maybe $1 if they're lucky. But then they have to turn around and pay UPS $10 or $15 to ship that heavy bag to your front door. So on that one transaction, they have instantly lost somewhere between $9 and $14.
I have to assume the grand plan was, well, okay, we'll lose money on the food, but they'll also throw in a diamond-studded collar with a huge 90% profit margin.
That was the dream. That was the entire thesis of the company. They believed the food and litter were loss leaders that would get you in the door to buy the high-margin items like toys, accessories, and gourmet treats.
That's not what happened, is it?
Consumer behavior did not cooperate. People are smart. They took the cheap, heavy food with the subsidized shipping, said thank you very much, and they didn't buy the expensive, skooky toys. The purchasing patterns never shifted to high-margin goods.
So they built this incredibly complex, incredibly expensive machine that was perfectly designed to lose money.
They built a very efficient, very high-tech incinerator for venture capital.
It's just amazing because when you lay it all out like that, it seems so painfully obvious. Shipping sand is a bad business model. Selling dollar bills for 70 cents is a bad business model. Why didn't anyone with any power step in and stop them?
Because of a concept from behavioral finance called the fantastic object.
The what?
The fantastic object. It's a term used to describe an investment that becomes so exciting, so hyped, so seemingly revolutionary that it stops being analyzed as a business and becomes a screen onto which people project their fantasies.
So it's not a company, it's a dream.
It's a dream. It was the future of retail. It was the Amazon of pet supplies. When you have a fantastic object, people, investors, journalists, even the employees, they stop looking at the profit and loss statement and they start looking at the giant balloon in the Macy's parade. They get caught up in the story.
So the sock puppet was almost like a magician's trick. Look at the funny sock over here. Don't look at the giant burning pile of money in our warehouse.
It was the perfect distraction. It distracted everyone, possibly including the executives themselves, from the cold, hard, terrifying reality of their own numbers.
So let's talk about when reality finally crashed the party. Because for a company that rose so incredibly fast, the fall was, it was blink and you miss it fast.
It was incredibly rapid. The velocity of the collapse is one of the most remarkable parts of the story. Remember, the IPO was in February of 2000. By September 2000, that's just 7 months later, the walls were already closing in. The cash from the IPO was almost gone.
Did they try to make any changes to stop the bleeding?
They flailed. In September, they made this big announcement that they were moving their customer service call center from San Francisco to Greenwood, Indiana.
Why Indiana?
Cost cutting.
Yeah.
It's much cheaper to run a call center and pay salaries in Indiana than it is in the Bay Area. But it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It saved them a few bucks, but the ship had a hole in the hull the size of a blue whale.
Did they try to find a buyer? Surely someone wanted that brand recognition, the customer list.
They did. They went, cap in hand, to PetSmart, the big brick-and-mortar giant they had been trying to destroy, and they asked for a buyout.
That must have been a humbling conversation.
I imagine so. PetSmart looked at their books, saw the disaster, and made an offer.
Was it a good offer?
It was a deeply insulting offer. PetSmart offered to buy the company for less than the net cash value Pets.com had in the bank.
What does that mean?
It means PetSmart basically said, we will take your company, but we're going to pay you less than the actual money you currently have. We're essentially charging you to take this disaster off your hands.
Wow. And the board said no.
The board refused. Pride, I guess. They still thought, we're Pets.com. We have the sock puppet. We're worth more than this.
The narrator's voice comes in. They were not, in fact, worth more than this.
They were not. So November 2000 arrives. This is less than a year after that triumphant Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
The money is gone.
Yeah.
No new investors are stepping up because the entire dot-com bubble is bursting everywhere. The party is over.
So what happens the final day?
November 7th, 2000. The announcement comes down from the board. Pets.com is shutting down all operations, effective immediately.
Just like that, a press release.
Just like that. They announced they would cease taking new orders on November 9th at 11:00 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
I'm just imagining being a customer. You go to the website at 10:59 a.m., you can buy a bag of dog food, you refresh the page at 11:01, and it's just gone.
It was a hard stop, a digital ghost town overnight. And the human cost was immediate and brutal. They laid off 255 of their 320 employees that day.
Almost everyone. Just gone in an instant.
Almost everyone. And the investors who bought in at the IPO. Remember that stock price? It debuted at $11 a share.
Right.
On the day of the liquidation announcement, it fell to 19 cents.
$11 to 19 cents. That's effectively zero. It's a total wipeout.
A total, complete wipeout. If you had invested $1,000 into Pets.com stock in February, by November you had enough left to maybe buy a sandwich and a cup of coffee.
Now, whenever we talk about these massive corporate failures, there's always a part of this story that just makes me a little angry. The executives. The people who were actually steering the ship into the iceberg, did they go down with the ship?
Well, yes and no. The CEO, Julie Wainwright, and 9 other top executives did stay on to, and I quote, oversee the liquidation.
Which means what? Turning off the lights and selling the furniture.
Pretty much. Selling off the assets, winding down the company legally.
Did they do it for free, as a gesture of goodwill to the employees they just fired?
They did not. Wainwright received $235,000 in severance pay. But on top of that, the board approved a $225,000 retention payment.
A retention payment? To retain her for what? The company is dead? There's nothing to retain her for?
The justification was that they needed to pay her to retain her services to manage the shutting down process. So while 255 people were sent home with their personal belongings in cardboard boxes, the CEO walked away with nearly $500,000 for overseeing the spectacular failure she had presided over.
It leaves a very bitter taste.
It does. It's legally standard in many cases, but ethically, it's tough to swallow. The stockholders had a final meeting in January 2001 to formalize the end. They changed the company's name to iPet Holdings, sold off the last of the assets, and that was it. Pets.com was officially dust.
But the pieces of the company, the valuable bits, they didn't just vanish into thin air. They went somewhere. Let's talk about the scavengers. Who got the good stuff from the wreckage?
Well, the single most valuable asset they owned, by far, was the domain name, Pets.com.
And who ended up with that?
PetSmart.
Of course. The very company they tried to disrupt, the company that made that insulting offer, ended up owning their name.
And if you go to your browser right now, today, in 2026, and you type in Pets.com, go ahead, try it.
It just redirects you straight to PetSmart's website.
The old-school brick-and-mortar giant won. They were patient, they waited out the storm, they let Pets.com burn through hundreds of millions of dollars educating the market about online shopping, and then they swooped in and bought the front door for pennies on the dollar.
That is a masterclass in strategy. What about the puppet? Did someone buy the rights to the sock?
The puppet had a very strange afterlife. In 2002, a joint venture literally called Sock Puppet LLC, I'm not making that up, bought the rights to the mascot for $125,000.
$125,000 for a disgraced mascot. What on earth did they do with it?
It was licensed to a company called Bar None, Inc. They were a finance firm that specialized in car loans for people with bad credit.
Wait, a subprime auto loan company used the Pets.com puppet as their mascot.
They did. And get this. The new slogan, spoken by the puppet in the commercials, was, "Everyone deserves a second chance."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is incredibly, almost poetically meta. I'm a failed.com mascot. You have a terrible credit score. Let's work together.
It was actually pretty clever advertising. It ran for about 9 commercials in 2002, but then the puppet kind of faded back into obscurity.
You know, for all the talk of greed and hubris and stupidity, I did read one thing in our source notes that made me smile. A little moment of redemption right at the very end.
Yes, the dog food.
Tell us about the dog food.
So when they shut down in November 2000, they had these massive warehouses full of inventory, tons and tons of kibble. They couldn't sell it The easiest thing would have been to just dump it all in a landfill.
But they didn't.
They didn't. They worked with their charity arm, which was called Pets.Commitment, and they arranged for a massive donation.
Where did it all go?
They sent more than 21 tons of high-quality dog food to the mushers in Alaska's interior.
To the sled dog teams?
Exactly. To the working dogs that run the Iditarod and other races. It was a huge logistical challenge to get it all up there, but they did it. So the final act of Pets.com wasn't a frivolous Super Bowl ad. It was feeding thousands of hungry dogs in the Arctic.
I really like that. It doesn't forgive the $300 million loss, but it is a really nice final footnote to the story.
It is a positive final act.
So let's zoom out a little. We've told the story from beginning to end. But why does it stick with us? Why are we still talking about this specific failure decades later? You mentioned that fantastic object idea earlier.
I think Pets.com persists in our collective memory because it's the perfect, most concise symbol of the irrational exuberance, as Alan Greenspan called it, of that time. It shows how quickly the culture can build something up and then tear it down. 1 minute, you're the hero of the new economy. The next, you're the villain.
There's that commercial that aired right after they crashed, the parody ad.
Oh, the E-Trade ad. It was savage.
Yes. Tell us about that.
So this is during the 2001 Super Bowl. Just 1 year after Pets.com had been the star of the show, the online brokerage firm E-Trade aired this spot that was a parody of that famous Crying Indian anti-pollution commercial from the 1970s.
I remember that ad.
In the E-Trade version, it showed a chimpanzee on a horse riding through a ruined, desolate landscape.
A post-apocalyptic .com wasteland.
Exactly. You see broken computers, empty office buildings with police signs, and the chimp rides past a demolished company called eSocks.com, and then a dirty, discarded, rain-soaked sock puppet lands at his feet, and the chimpanzee sheds a single tear.
That is just brutal. It's kicking a man when he's already down.
It was vicious, but it perfectly captured the public mood. America felt scammed. They felt like they had been sold a bill of goods by all these .com companies, and the sock puppet had become the face of that scam. CNET later named it one of the greatest .com disasters of all time.
But, and here is the big twist. This is the part of the story that I think is most relevant to us today. The fundamental idea. It wasn't actually wrong.
No. The core idea was sound. It was just 20 years too early.
Because I order my dog's food online. All the time, everyone I know with a pet orders their supplies online. The company, Chewy.com, is a massive, publicly traded, successful company.
Chewy is basically the ghost of Pets.com, but a version that actually worked.
So what's the difference? Why is Chewy a multi-billion-dollar success story and Pets.com is a late-night talk show joke, if they are, for all intents and purposes, doing the exact same thing?
I wouldn't say they are doing the exact same thing. The what is the same selling pet food online. But the how, and crucially the when, are completely different.
Okay, so break down the how for me. What did Chewy do differently?
First, logistics and technology. In 1999, warehousing was largely a manual process. Tracking shipments was primitive. Today, Chewy uses these highly automated fulfillment centers with robots that dramatically cut the cost per order.
So robots are packing the kibble now, which is way cheaper than human hands.
Right. Second, and this is a big one, is route density. In 1999, the FedEx truck was stopping at maybe one house in your entire neighborhood. Today, that same Amazon or FedEx truck is stopping at 20 houses on your block. The last mile cost of delivery is shared across way more packages.
That makes a ton of sense. The network is denser, so it's cheaper for them to drop off my 40-pound bag of sand.
Exactly. And finally, there's just cultural adoption. In 1999, buying things online was still a little bit scary for a lot of people. It was a novelty. Today, it's the default. Chewy didn't have to spend $11 million just to explain to people how to use a website and trust it with their credit card.
The market was ready.
The market was ready. The technology was ready. Ryan Cohen, the founder of Chewy, was actually asked about the Pets.com comparison when Chewy had its own IPO back in 2019.
Did he embrace it? Did he say, we stand on the shoulders of giants?
He hated it. He absolutely rejected it. He called the comparison absolute crazy and said there was nothing in common between the two companies.
Which feels a little defensive, doesn't it?
It is a bit defensive, but he was right about the execution. He focused on obsessive customer service and getting the unit economics right from day one. He didn't buy a Super Bowl ad until he knew he could afford it. He built the business first, and then he built the brand. Pets.com did the exact opposite.
That's the takeaway right there, isn't it? Brand versus business.
It is. A brand is what people think and feel about you. A business is how you make money. Pets.com had a world-class, globally recognized brand. It just had zero business attached to it.
It really makes you look at the current landscape a lot differently. Because we are, right now, living through another massive hype cycle, aren't we?
We always are. There's always a new bubble, whether it was crypto a few years ago, or AI today, or the metaverse.
It makes me wonder, are there sock puppets out there right now, today?
I can guarantee you that there are.
Companies that everyone knows that are on the cover of every magazine that have that marriage made in heaven with all the big investors. But if you actually lifted the hood and looked at their unit economics, you'd find out they're just selling dollar bills for 70 cents.
That is the provocative question I would leave you, the listener, with. Look at the apps on your phone. Look at the services you use every day, especially the ones that seem weirdly cheap or free. Which ones are actually sustainable, profitable businesses, and which ones are just burning through a mountain of venture capital to keep the lights on until they either get bought or they collapse?
Are you buying a product or are you just buying into a fantastic object?
Exactly. And just because it has a really cool logo or a cute mascot doesn't mean it's going to survive the winter.
On that slightly ominous note, I think we're going to wrap up. I'm now going to go look at my entire investment portfolio and panic slightly.
It's always a healthy exercise.
If you want to see the terrifying math for yourself, or pictures of that giant falloon, or read the details of the triumph the insult comic dog lawsuit, please check the show notes on our website. We've got all the sources linked there for you to go even deeper. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you.